This is the Strait of Hormuz, a narrow stretch of water that carries nearly a fifth of the world's oil. Every day, millions of barrels pass through this corridor. But here, a single mistake can ignite global consequences. Warships patrol silently. Tankers move under constant threat. Because in this place, stability is an illusion. The Strait of Hormuz is one of the most strategically critical waterways on Earth. It lies between Iran to the north and Oman to the south, forming a narrow maritime gateway that connects the Persian Gulf to the open ocean. At its tightest point, this passage is just 33 kilometers wide. Within that space, only a fraction is safely navigable for the massive oil tankers that pass through it every day. And yet, despite its size, its importance is enormous. Roughly 20% of the world's oil supply moves through this single corridor. Every day, supertankers, some carrying over 2 million barrels, navigate these confined lanes. The economies of entire nations depend on the uninterrupted flow of energy through this stretch of water. But the strait is not just a shipping route, it is a pressure point. A place where global energy demand, regional rivalries, and military power converge in a fragile balance. Iran controls its northern edge, while international shipping depends on access guaranteed by global powers. This creates a constant tension, one that rarely erupts into full conflict, but never fully disappears. There are no alternative routes that can fully replace it. Pipelines can divert some oil, but not enough. If the strait were blocked, even temporarily, the impact would ripple across the world within days. Fuel prices would surge, supply chains would strain. Markets would react instantly, and this vulnerability is well understood. Warships patrol these waters year-round. Surveillance aircraft scan the horizon. Naval exercises simulate worst-case scenarios. Because in the Strait of Hormuz, the margin for error is almost non-existent. A miscalculation, a mechanical failure, or a deliberate act. Any one of these could disrupt a system that billions depend on. This is not just a geographic feature, it is a lifeline, narrow, exposed, and constantly under threat. Geography and physical conditions. The Strait of Hormuz is defined by its narrowness and its precision. At first glance, 33 kilometers may not seem restrictive. But for modern shipping, especially oil tankers stretching over 300 meters in length, the usable space is far smaller. The strait operates on a controlled traffic system. 2 shipping lanes, each only about 3 kilometers wide, separated by a narrow buffer zone. This is where the world's energy flows. Inbound and outbound vessels must follow strict corridors. There is no room for deviation, no space for error. A tanker drifting even slightly off course risks collision, grounding, or worse, blocking the entire passage. Beneath the surface, the seabed adds another layer of risk. The depth varies significantly, with some areas shallow enough to threaten fully loaded supertankers. Navigators must rely on precise charts and constant monitoring, and a single misjudgment in depth or positioning could immobilize a vessel in one of the busiest oil routes on Earth. Then there are the coastlines. To the north lies Iran, rugged, mountainous, and heavily fortified. To the south, Oman's Musandam Peninsula juts sharply into the strait, creating a confined, almost funnel-like passage. This geography naturally compresses maritime traffic into tight lanes, amplifying congestion and risk. There are no wide detours here, no alternate channels. Every vessel, regardless of size or origin, must pass through this same narrow corridor. And this confinement has consequences. In open ocean, ships can maneuver freely to avoid threats or mechanical issues. In the Strait of Hormuz, that freedom disappears. Tankers move in a slow, deliberate procession, often surrounded by naval escorts or under surveillance. Even minor disruptions, engine trouble, navigation errors, or sudden stops can trigger a chain reaction. One vessel slows down, another adjusts, and within minutes the entire flow can be compromised. The geography forces everything into alignment. It creates order, but also fragility. Because in a place this narrow, this controlled, and this essential, there is no margin for chaos. Environmental systems. Beyond its narrow geography, the Strait of Hormuz is shaped by an unforgiving environment. Temperatures here regularly exceed 45 degrees Celsius in summer. The heat radiates off both sea and rock, creating a dense, oppressive atmosphere. For crews on board tankers, this is not just discomfort, it is a constant strain on equipment, visibility, and human endurance. Humidity adds another layer. Warm waters from the Persian Gulf trap moisture in the air, forming a thick haze that often lingers over the strait. This haze reduces visibility, sometimes without warning. Ships moving through already confined lanes must rely heavily on radar and instrumentation, knowing that visual confirmation can disappear in moments. Then come the winds. Seasonal winds sweep through the region, especially during the Shamal. Strong northwesterly winds that can whip up sudden waves and reduce control for large vessels. While the strait is not known for massive ocean swells, its confined nature means even moderate turbulence can destabilize precise navigation. Currents further complicate movement. Water flows in and out of the Persian Gulf through this narrow opening, creating shifting currents that can subtly push vessels off course. In open waters, such drift can be corrected easily. Here, within tight shipping lanes, even small deviations demand immediate response. And sometimes the environment turns hostile without warning. Dust storms from surrounding deserts can sweep across the strait, turning daylight into a muted orange haze. These storms obscure navigation systems, disrupt communication, and force vessels into slow, cautious movement. At night, the risks multiply. High traffic density combined with limited visibility creates a scenario where every radar signal matters. Every course correction must be exact. There is no space for hesitation. What makes these environmental factors dangerous is not their intensity alone, but how they interact with the strait's geography. Heat stresses machinery, humidity limits visibility, currents shift position, wind disrupts control, all within a space where ships cannot afford mistakes. This is not a violent ocean, but it is a precise one. A system where small environmental pressures can escalate into major incidents. And in a corridor this critical, even nature plays a role in maintaining the tension. Historical discovery/early importance. Long before oil tankers and warships defined its identity, the Strait of Hormuz was already a gateway of immense importance. For centuries, this narrow passage served as a vital link between the civilizations of the Middle East, South Asia, and East Africa. Ancient traders moved through these waters carrying spices, textiles, pearls, and precious metals. The Persian Gulf itself was a hub of commerce, and the strait was its only outlet to the wider world. Control of this corridor meant control of trade. Empires understood this early. The Portuguese were among the first European powers to recognize its strategic value. In the early 16th century, they established control over the region, building fortifications to dominate maritime movement. Their goal was simple: regulate and profit from the flow of goods between East and West. But dominance over the strait was never permanent. The Portuguese were eventually pushed out by a coalition of Persian forces and the British in the 17th century. From that point onward, influence over the strait became a shifting balance between regional powers and global empires, each recognizing its strategic necessity. For centuries, however, its importance remained tied to trade, not energy. That changed in the 20th century. With the discovery of vast oil reserves in the Persian Gulf, the Strait of Hormuz transformed from a regional trade route into a global lifeline. Oil exports from countries like Saudi Arabia, Iran, Iraq, Kuwait, and the United Arab Emirates began flowing through this narrow passage in ever-increasing volumes. By the mid-1900s, the strait had become indispensable. Industrial economies across Europe, Asia, and eventually the entire world grew dependent on the uninterrupted supply of oil. Tankers replaced wooden trading ships, and the scale of movement expanded beyond anything seen before. But with this transformation came a new kind of vulnerability. Unlike ancient trade goods, oil could not be easily rerouted or stockpiled at scale without consequences. The world's energy system became tied to a single, narrow corridor, one that had always been contested and always been exposed. History had already shown a pattern. Control the strait, and you influence the flow of global wealth. And as the modern era unfolded, that influence would no longer be measured in spices or silver, but in energy, power, and geopolitical stability. The Strait of Hormuz is not just strategically fragile. It has already been tested, repeatedly, under real conflict. The Tanker War, 1984 to 1988. During the Iran-Iraq War, the strait became an active battlefield. Both nations targeted oil tankers to cripple each other's economies. But the attacks did not stay contained. Neutral vessels, Kuwaiti, Saudi, even international, were struck by missiles, mines, and air raids. More than 400 ships were attacked. Tankers burned in open water. Crews abandoned vessels under fire. Insurance costs skyrocketed, and global markets began to feel the strain. What was once a commercial route had turned into a war zone, where simply passing through meant risking destruction. Operation Praying Mantis, 1988. In April 1988, a U.S. Navy warship, the USS Samuel B. Roberts, struck an Iranian mine in the Gulf. The response was immediate. The United States launched Operation Praying Mantis, the largest U.S. naval combat operation since World War II. Iranian oil platforms used for military coordination were destroyed. Warships were sunk. The confrontation unfolded dangerously close to the strait. It was a clear message. Disruption in these waters would trigger overwhelming force. But it also revealed how quickly escalation could spiral. Iran Air Flight 655, 1978. Amid this tension, tragedy struck from miscalculation. On July 3, 1988, the USS Vincennes, operating in the region, mistakenly identified a civilian Airbus A300 as an attacking military aircraft. Within minutes, missiles were launched. The plane was destroyed. All 290 passengers and crew were killed. The incident sent shockwaves across the world. It exposed the extreme pressure, confusion, and split-second decision-making that defines operations in this region, where civilian and military presence overlap constantly. MV Limburg attack, 2002. Years later, the threat shifted from state conflict to asymmetric warfare. In October 2002, the French oil tanker MV Limburg was attacked off the coast of Yemen by a small explosive-laden boat. The blast tore through the hull, spilling thousands of barrels of oil into the sea and killing a crew member. Though not inside the strait itself, the attack demonstrated a critical reality. Large oil tankers are highly vulnerable, even to low-tech assaults, and any successful strike sends immediate ripples through global energy markets. 2019 Gulf of Oman tanker attacks. In 2019, tensions surged again. Several oil tankers were damaged by explosions near the strait. The exact responsibility remains disputed, but the message was unmistakable. Shipping in this region could be targeted at any time. Images of burning vessels drifting in open water circulated worldwide. Once again, uncertainty gripped global oil supply chains. Stana Impero Sager, 2019. Just weeks later, Iran seized the British-flagged tanker Stana Impero as it transited the strait. Armed forces boarded the vessel and redirected it into Iranian waters. The act was widely seen as retaliation for earlier geopolitical tensions. But more importantly, it demonstrated how quickly control over the strait could be asserted, not through destruction, but through capture. A single ship taken in hours became a global diplomatic crisis. Continuous naval standoffs. Beyond these major events, the strait exists in a constant state of near conflict. Fast attack boats shadow warships. Drones monitor movements overhead. Naval vessels from different nations operate within kilometers of each other, often exchanging warnings, sometimes coming dangerously close. There is no declared war, but there is no true peace either. Each of these incidents reveals the same truth. The Strait of Hormuz is not just vulnerable, it is actively contested. Conflict here does not need to be large-scale to be effective. A mine, a missile, a seizure. Any one of these can disrupt a system that the entire world depends on. And history shows it already has. Modern encounters/present-day risks. Today, the Strait of Hormuz operates under constant surveillance and constant tension. It is one of the most militarized waterways in the world. The United States Navy maintains a persistent presence through the Fifth Fleet, based in Bahrain. Allied forces from the United Kingdom and other nations conduct patrols and escort missions. On the opposite shore, Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps Navy operates fast attack boats, coastal missile systems, and drone units specifically designed for this confined environment. Every movement is watched. Oil tankers no longer pass through quietly. Many are tracked in real time by satellites, monitored by intelligence networks, and sometimes escorted by naval vessels. What was once a commercial route now resembles a controlled corridor under permanent observation. But the risks have evolved. Modern threats are no longer limited to missiles or mines. Drones now play a central role, used for surveillance, intimidation, and potentially precision attacks. Unmanned aerial systems can approach vessels quickly, often without warning, testing defenses and probing reactions. Cyber threats have also emerged. Shipping systems, navigation tools, and port operations are increasingly digital. Disrupting them does not require physical force. And a compromised navigation signal or hacked system could redirect vessels, create confusion, or even trigger collisions in this already narrow passage. Then there is the threat of closure. Iran has repeatedly signaled that it could block the strait in response to geopolitical pressure. While a full closure would be difficult to sustain due to international military response, even a temporary disruption, through mines, seizures, or coordinated attacks, could halt traffic long enough to send global markets into shock. And markets react instantly. Oil prices can spike within hours of an incident. Insurance premiums surge. Shipping companies reroute or delay voyages. The entire global supply chain feels the impact, not days later but immediately. Meanwhile, traffic continues. Dozens of tankers still pass through daily. Each one carries not just oil, but economic stability for entire regions. Asia, in particular, depends heavily on this route. Countries like China, Japan, India, and South Korea rely on uninterrupted flow to sustain their industries and populations. This creates a paradox. The strait is too important to fail, but too fragile to guarantee stability. There is no backup that can fully replace it. Pipelines offer partial alternatives, but they cannot match the volume. The world remains tied to this narrow corridor, despite knowing its risks. And so, operations continue in a state of controlled tension. Warships shadow tankers. Drones scan the horizon. Command centers monitor every signal. Because in the Strait of Hormuz, peace is not defined by safety, but by the absence of escalation. Yet, the Strait of Hormuz is not just a location on a map. It is a threshold where geography, energy, and power converge into a single, fragile system. Here, the natural world has already imposed its limits. Narrow waters, harsh climate, restricted movement, a place where navigation demands precision and mistakes carry consequences. But it is human dependence that has transformed it into something far more dangerous. Nearly a fifth of the world's oil flows through this corridor. Entire economies, nations, industries, populations are tied to its uninterrupted function, and yet it remains exposed, contested, uncertain. History has shown how quickly stability can fracture. A mine in the water, a missile in the sky, a misidentified aircraft. Moments, measured in seconds, have led to consequences felt across continents. And still, the traffic continues. Day after day, tankers pass through these narrow lanes, carrying the weight of global demand. Warships patrol silently alongside them. Drones circle above, every movement calculated, every decision monitored, because there is no alternative that truly replaces this route. The world has built its energy system around a corridor it cannot fully protect. This is the paradox of the Strait of Hormuz. It is essential, but never secure. In an age of advanced technology and global interconnection, one of the most critical lifelines on Earth remains vulnerable to the simplest disruptions: geography, human error, or conflict. And so, the Strait endures as a constant reminder that even in a modern world of power and control, there are still places where stability depends on restraint, and where a single spark could change everything.